Please sit with me and allow me to tell you the chronicle of the end of the world. It was spring 1490, the dawn of despair. The world's descent into madness, damnation, doom and despair began. The countdown clock to the end of the world. This nightmare would eventually see the world consumed in a cloud of pestilent fog. No escape, no waking from the nightmare. Across Europe, farmers began complaining of a foul stench hanging in the air. It rose from the earth and made all who came into contact with it feel that it was the first signs of a far more serious issue to come. This foul smell was the first appearance of the coming fog that would soon be known as the creeping death. The lushest fields, once green and teeming with life, and crops were suffocated by the miasma. Very slowly it began to kill the crop yields, harvests became barren, whole fields the very image of death to come. In every region, every crop, wheat, barley, grapes, nothing survived in the ground long enough to bear fruit or bring any sustenance. Shortly after, it was no surprise, the grim expectation it must have been for those same farmers when their livestock died. No matter how well kept the livestock were, every one of them began to bloat with illness and the distended look of a creature so desperately gripped by famine. Where they fell, they rotted, the meat so spoiled by the blight that the only relief it could give to any who consumed it would be a swift and painful death. 1490 to 1491, the first year. By the autumn, the malevolent presence of the creeping death had established itself across Europe. Whispers swept the land that some long-forgotten sin was responsible for the death that swept the lands. The air began to feel thick to breathe, like the claustrophobic feeling of a breath so devoid of oxygen that no matter what a person tried, their efforts to gasp the air were laboured, even for the fittest among them. Populations across the land were decimated. People fell ill in their thousands, weakened and made sick as the food they tried to grow and eat turned to poison in their hungering bellies. As the year drew to a close, a bitter cold began to freeze the earth. A harsh winter closed in on the lands, constricting all in the vice-like grip of the plunging temperatures. This at least helped to curtail some of the foul smell. While fire may not have been able to burn away the horrid stench, the winter at least seemed to force the creeping death to lay dormant in the frozen ground. 1491 heralded the silent spring, where a faint hope began to creep into the hearts of the populace, like the slow rise of a winter dawn. People whispered that the frost had halted the creeping death, the worst was over and they could start to rebuild once more and wake from their year-long nightmare. This was a short-lived and futile dream, however. As the spring arrived, the nightmare returned in earnest, and the true reality of this dire situation began to set in. Creeping death returned, though subtly at first. However, no longer seemingly content to be a poisonous and awful smell, for there were rumours that the creeping death had a malevolent presence. It rose from the earth, burbling forth as a roiling, low-lying mist, akin to the roiling smoke of a bubbling cauldron. The fog took on a spectral aspect, haunting the lands and rising ever upwards, giving the sense of rising waters pouring into the hull of a vessel, slowly but inevitably dragging it to the depths. Once prosperous regions and counties now lay desolate, their populations ravaged and chaos reigned across the lands. Money became useless as food and equipment became the most precious of commodities. To the north, the fjords of Norway had frozen, cutting off whole communities as trapped ships could not reach or lead them. Italy's once lush vineyards withered and became a deathly husk. Riots gripped the major cities, and a mass exodus from the largest population centres in a desperate scramble for higher and higher ground left cities such as Paris, London, Cologne and Venice a shadow of their former glory. Their people fleeing, though in truth this was pointless. There was nowhere to flee, nowhere to escape the impending doom. The creeping death rose, inch by inch, the herald of inevitable death. 1492 to 1493 were the years of desperation. The creeping death is at around mid-shin to knee height at the beginning of 1492, however it continues to rise upwards. Desolation sweeps the lands, whole villages are swallowed by the fog, the great forests of Germany stand barren, rivers turn to sludge, and the fish within them, a precious resource following the deaths of livestock, now float to the surface lifeless. The creeping death is a constant threat, withering any who get too close to the ground. Most people have perished, only the fittest and strongest survive. Gripped by a desperation, they form fragile alliances known as doom companies. Grim determination and the defiant refusal to surrender to the inevitable drives them forward as they hunt for resources and the hope of survival for even a few more days. By 1493, the fog is waist height in most locations, madness sets in and the few survivors that remain begin to turn on each other. Whether driven mad by the ever-present threat of the fog, the constant battle for survival or the ravenous hunger, alliances fracture and the fight for survival is more desperate now than ever. The creeping death seems to sap the strength of any whom it touches. Weaponry rusts in its scabbards, food spoils before it can even be eaten. Even the very air seems to fight a hateful war of rebellion against the lungs of those who dare to try to breathe it. The doom companies seek refuge in abandoned towers, castles and ruins. In a mad dash for higher and higher ground, like rats attempting to flee a sinking ship, people find brief respite in man-made structures, the only places that the creeping death does not seem to bellow forth from. Even this sanctuary is temporary, however, as the fog continues to rise and threatens to engulf the world. 1494, the final year and the dying ember of a world smothered in fog. By the spring of 1494, the fog was higher than any man, the world shrouded in death. The miasmic tendrils of the creeping death grasped out to choke the last breaths of humanity. By 1494's end, the whole world falls silent. At its zenith, the creeping death leaves echoes of civilization in its wake. Having engulfed all but the tallest of structures, it swallows whole towns and cities beneath its deadly blankets. There are few survivors now. Only those who have reached the highest places stand defiant to the bitter, inevitable end. These proud survivors know that death will come for them, and either by suffocation, starvation, or the sword, the creeping death will claim life's last breath. As the final breath leaves the lips of the last human, the creeping death brings silence to the world. None have survived. No more hope remains. The end has been nigh for 5 long and desperate years, and now it has finally arrived. This is 1490 Doom. Yes, dear viewers, this is the secret I have been working on, and many of you may have seen the game revealed at Adepticon. Please follow the link to Wargames where you can find out about the upcoming Kickstarter. I am working with the team to bring you the latest lore, painting tutorials, a podcast episode with its creators, and something very, very special. If you see me at Solip this year, make sure to come by, say hi, and politely ask me, "Excuse me, Duke, what year is it?" And I may just have a surprise for a lucky few of you. To continue to discover the lore and setting of 1490 Doom, click the playlist link to your right and make sure to turn on notifications to find out the official lore before anyone else. Please like, subscribe, share a video with a friend, and click the link to the 1490 Doom Kickstarter below to dive into this bleak and deadly setting. Thank you for watching. I will see you all soon.